but we got a lot to talk about too. So join us if you like, or just sit back and listen, and we'll keep going. All right. So, Preston, we've talked a little bit about certain parts of the state that it's prevalent, and certain radon, and certain parts of Charlotte.
Right.
That are prevalent. And then, and what about if your neighbor has it? Is it more likely you're going to have it?
There's no real way to tell except to test, Paul. And you know, yeah, you could have a neighbor that has 14 picocuries per liter, and you could be 0.2. So there's not really a correlation.
Really?
Between what your neighbor has and what you have or don't have.
All right. So what about your water?
Okay, so people say, should you test your water? I'm for testing everything, but obviously test your air first. The only way to test your water is via a lab. But we alluded to before the break. You asked me areas that we had found. And there's no like, hey, this area is more prevalent. I mean, obviously I've seen some trends, but that isn't something to set. We have noticed that around the edges of lakes, lakefront property, can be a little bit more prone to it. I think because there's a certain amount of radon gas coming up through the ground, and where you have big bodies of water, that somewhat plugs that, so where it comes up around the edges, it's a little more concentrated. Our highest levels that we have found have been actually lakefront homes.
Yeah, all right. Someone says, hey, I've lived in this home for so long, I've just been here 20 years, why bother?
Are they coughing when they tell you that? I mean, I'm trying to be nice, but that's a dumb argument. I mean, that's like, yeah, we've been doing something wrong for 20 years, so we're just going to keep doing it wrong. It's a little like, yeah, I've used asbestos for years, and yeah, is there some reason? Just because you've been doing something bad or haven't been doing something you should be, like my dad ate fatty foods for 20 years, and then he had a heart attack. It's time to change. Just because you're doing something that you've been doing something for 20 years doesn't mean that it was right 19 years ago.
Just off the cuff question to you, Preston. Why do you think it's so important now that we're having this conversation about radon?
I think there's so much more of an awareness of it, number one. And number two, houses have become a lot tighter. And what I mean by that is more energy efficient.
They don't leak as much?
Yeah. I mean, my grandma's farmhouse, built in 1909, that thing still in the family. You can look underneath it and see clear across. It's on piers, but it's open. There's no skirt wall on it. There's a whole bunch of dogs under there.
Cats,
yeah, it's not well insulated. It doesn't hold heat and cooling very well. But you know what? It doesn't have radon, and it doesn't have moisture problems because it's very well ventilated in one way or another. Now, the problem is when you start sealing up houses and making them tighter and tighter and tighter, yes, you save energy, but you also trap things like moisture and radon. So that's why it's becoming more of an issue.
And microbial growth.
And that's yes, we would rather use that than the M word that rhymes with soul, which is not a good word in real estate.
Yeah, microbial growth.
We like that word.
Sounds like technical.
Yeah, we like that.
So, all right. So, in looking at your radon, again, this is probably another off-the-cuff question for you. If you get a positive test that's over, what is it, 4 picocuries or whatever picocuries
per liter, yeah.
Yeah, per liter. Would you recommend getting another test just to make sure that it's not a false positive?
Yes. I highly would recommend another test just to make sure that person's machine is, there might be a calibration issue or something. And then, the homeowner buyer has a couple of choices. They can walk away from the contract. They can require the seller to do a mitigation system. They can ask for monies to get an estimate, or they can accept it as is and then do it themselves. But they basically have those 4 options. But according to the state, it is something they can walk away from the contract if they so desire. I don't know. You may probably know more about that. But usually there's some sort of negotiation. And, the mitigation systems work if they're done correctly.